Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 23, Part 4. I moved forward again, peeking around the edge of the crates that formed a crude wall. The pair lay on an old army cot. The mare lay on her belly, panting and wore a lazy grin. Heavy metal armor enclosed her chest, painted red and adorned with spikes, and matching her wild spiked mane. The stallion that still lay atop her was fairly scrawny, wearing only a thick metal collar, and his legs were crisscrossed with scars. His cutie mark was a crosshair. I assumed that made the pipe rifle lying on his floor his, which would in turn make the large bladed spear leaned against the wall hers. The stallion was panting into the mare's mane, giving a few firm nuzzles. His lips pulled back in a grin as he nuzzled into her ear, murmuring something that led both of them to snicker. It almost seemed tender, as if under the spikes and scars, these two were really just a pair of ponies. But my eyes glanced back to the table, with the innocent pony that they had murdered and butchered. I thought of the pair of fools, brutalized in their own home. I thought of Emerald, the first changeling I'd encountered in 2 centuries, choking on her own blood. I prefer to plan my actions through detached logic, but emotion can be a powerful motivator. I was already calling up my stats as I walked smoothly around the corner. I brought up the weapon, and in the middle of my stride tongued the trigger. At maybe 2 yards distance, the arcane assistance was more than enough. My weapon bucked simultaneously with a wet smack of the bullet smashing into the side of the stallion's head. The muzzle swung down to the mare, who jerked in surprise as the stallion collapsed. I pulled the trigger, but her head turned towards me as if to seek the sudden sound. The round struck her in the muzzle. I fired a third round as smoothly as if I had planned it the whole time, and this one struck her squarely in the center of the head. She jerked and collapsed, forelegs twitching once before going still. Sats disengaged as the final casing clattered to the floor, leaving me panting softly. The moments felt surreal, as if I had just killed them in a trance that I was waking up from. I knew logically that every single action I had taken had been my own, but something about the spell felt unnatural and unnerving. It was also undeniably effective, I recognized, as I looked down upon my hoofwork. Even Dusty couldn't have done much better. I shook off the feeling, focusing again. 4 raiders down, 5 to go. Emerging from the same door I had entered, I walked up to Sickle, standing in the darkness where I had left her. I glanced around, spotting one of the ramps leading to the wall tops, and gestured for her to follow. She grunted, sounding annoyed, but did so. I tried to suppress the urge to wince at every clank of her armor or groan of the boards. We rejoined the others. While I took my belongings from Starlight, I reported to Dusty in a whisper.
The single story is clear. Just the 5 in this building now.
He nodded and whispered back. Soon as you're set, lead us out. Sickle, you follow her. Then me, then Starlight. If things go loud, Whisper, you fall in behind me. Good? I gave a quick nod. Even though it was all part of the plan, I felt a burn of adrenaline building. There were too many raiders too close together within the building to be sure of stealth. We were just hoping to eliminate as many as possible before things turned into a firefight. With my bag strapped on and rifle resting across my chest, I was ready. I glanced around, getting 2 nods and an impatient grunt in reply, and set off across the roof. I paused at the door for every pony to gather behind me, the light seeping in from behind the boards, playing over their bodies like zebra stripes. I put my eye to one of the cracks, trying to see inside, but the narrow sliver of view was useless. I pulled back, horn lighting up as I gripped the latch of crude door, slid it back, and strode straight in. I was ready to trigger Sats at a moment's notice, and hit it the instant I saw the raider sitting at the table on the far side of the room. He looked up, and in the hyper-focused state I could see his questioning expression past the sights of my pistol. I also saw that he wasn't wearing armor. He hadn't fully processed what was happening by the time I fired, putting 3 quick rounds into his torso as I advanced. Sats disengaged as he tumbled back off of the chair, legs flailing. I think he may have made a pained groan, but I'm not sure. His legs clutched at his chest, his eyes wide with shock at the sudden violence. They were still wide when I halted just above him. Even I didn't need Sats to put a final round into his head, ending his life. A clatter of metal preceded the sound of Sickle's blades sinking into flesh. I looked back. While this half of the room had tables, chairs, and couches, well lit by the ceiling's mounted bulb, the darker half had a couple of cots. Sickle was at one, pinning a struggling raider down by the neck, as her other foreleg rose and fell, stabbing them with her leg blades. Dusty and Starlight were moving in as well, each of them smartly covering the other 2 doors of the room. A mare's voice called out from above.
Fuck was that?
From below, a more muffled voice sounded.
Some pony shooting.
I had already swapped out my pistol magazine for a fresh one, thanks to my magic. On hearing the voices, I holstered it, swapping to my rifle. The raiders knew something was up. It was time to hit them as hard as possible before they finished putting the pieces together. The only problem with that was Sickle. The raider beneath her, he was still very much alive, emitting faint gurgles and grunts as his forelegs flailed and kicked against her. Sickle should have killed him already, but she hadn't. I could see that she has been stabbing him again and again in the hips and thighs. Painful, crippling injuries, but not immediately fatal. Dusty scuttled over to her, hissing something to her, but she just kept stabbing. The door at his end of the room opened, revealing a raider. I didn't get a good view of him before firing. Sats was still recharging, so I went without. He tumbled back down the stairs beyond the door, and I only then realized Dusty had been firing as well. A shout came from below, answered by a yell from above.
The fuck is going on down there?
I glanced up, just as a metal mask peeped up in the doorway. Dusty and I both fired, and it dropped down again. I thought we had hit, but a voice immediately shouted out.
Oh, no, fuck me, it's Sickle!
I shouldn't have been surprised that a raider might know who Sickle was. Heck, she might as well be a raider celebrity. Dusty dropped his rifle to his hooves and plunged his muzzle into a pouch. I came back a moment later with a grenade, which he quickly primed and threw through the doorway. A deep thump sounded above, followed by the upstairs mayor's voice, this time amplified by some loudspeaker.
Get to the can!
The blast of the grenade cut her off, but only for a moment.
Get to the fucking can, I'll handle that bitch!
The ceiling rattled as massive hoofsteps sounded above us, accompanied by the groans and squeals of machinery. My heart was pounding even harder. Dusty shouted past me. "Star! Lancer!" The hoofsteps banged down. Whatever was up there was massive. I looked back. Sickle was looking up at the ceiling, grinning wide in excitement. Starlight was running over to us, quickly swapping Emerald's rifle for her own Lancer. The hoofsteps thumped in unison, and the ceiling groaned loudly in protest. An instant of silence followed, broken by the deep slam of the hooves landing on the roof outside. The floor trembled under me, and outside the machinery groaned and hissed. A loudspeaker crackled as the amplified voice returned.
Hey bitch, are you in there?
A strange, vaguely mechanical thump followed her statement. It was lost immediately behind a deafening explosion as the wall across from us was reduced to flying splinters. An armored leg came down on me, throwing me to the ground as explosion after explosion hammered around us. The first explosion had knocked out the light, leaving only the strobe of explosions to illuminate the room. The only thing I could see was Sickle's head, tucked in tight to shield her face as she crouched over us. Her armored bulk sheltered us from the worst of the barrage. The sound relented, plunging us into smoke-choked darkness. My ears were ringing, but the amplified laughter of the mayor outside cut through it. I felt the floor tremble, and the screech and groan of machinery returned.
You still alive in there, Sickle?
Sickle rose, growling as she shook off several boards and bits of debris. I scrambled to my hooves, my mind racing at how to get away. I blinked away the afterimages of the explosions as my eyes rapidly adjusted to the darkness once again. Through the dispersing smoke, I caught a glimpse of a huge, pony-shaped form moving outside, but to my relief, not in our direction. It was then that I realized the explosions had knocked out power throughout the entire little fortress. There wasn't a single light to be seen. I was our eyes. Hoping that the mayor outside couldn't see any better than the ponies I was with, I hurried over to where the wall used to be. Only a few fragments of it remained, sticking up like wooden ribs of the devastated structure, and giving scant cover. Starlight stumbled and scrambled after me while I peeked out. That's when I saw Boomer. She was every bit as huge as Sickle. Hydraulics whined and metal scraped and screeched as she walked, each hoofstep sending another small tremble through the structure. At first glance, through the cloud of dust and smoke, I thought she was a pony-shaped machine. But then it struck me. She was wearing power armor. I felt completely inadequate with my tiny little gun, immediately understanding why Dusty had called for Starlight's Lancer. Fortunately, the power-armored raider was moving away from us down one of the walls, taunting us the whole way.
Yeah, you think you could just come in here and take my gang, huh?
Sickle staggered past me, coughing, her head turning from side to side as she tried to spot her adversary, but it would have been hard enough for her to see in the darkness even without her helm restricting her view. The power armor had a battle saddle. Through the darkness, I could see the chunky body of a huge gun with a short, thick barrel, an automatic grenade launcher, the very weapon that had just torn apart the side of the crude structure. But what had really caught my attention was the contraption on her back. It looked like a long set of rails with some bulky mechanisms along the underside, and an object nestled in the base of those rails. I didn't realize what it was until I caught a faint wisp of sickly green. I'd never seen one before, but I'd heard them described. Somehow, this power armor-clad raider had a balefire egg launcher. I realized that she wasn't running away from us as she crossed the wall to the other building, she was just getting to a safe distance.
Starlight!
I shouted over the buzz in my ears.
Shoot her!
Starlight coughed against the smoke, but brought her lancer around. She squinted, searching in the darkness outside.
Where? I don't see her!
My hoof shot out, pointing.
Right there!
She squinted a bit more, her lancer swaying well off from where I indicated.
I can't see anything!
she said, then added.
Are you pointing?
Outside, Boomer continued to taunt, her amplified voice echoing off the buildings.
You think you're such hot shit, huh? Well, you ain't taking a fucking thing from me.
She stepped onto the roof of the opposite building.
Starlight!
I shouted, my wings flicking to life as I lifted off.
A Illuminator!
I shot out, arcing up into the sky and banking around to fly directly over the raider. She was still walking, nearly to the middle of the roof.
This is my gang, my home. I ain't gonna let some butt-guzzling bitch take it from me, even if I have to flatten the whole fucking place myself.
She turned just as I fluttered to a stop over her. I kicked on the pitbuck screen, cranking the brightness up to max. The green light spilled out, lighting the twisted amalgamation of scrap metal that formed Boomer's armor. A powerful flash of red split the air a moment later with a sharp crack. I recoiled, blinking furiously. All I could see was the afterimage of the Lancer's shot. My heart sank as I heard the laughter, distorted and amplified. As my vision returned, I saw Boomer recovering her balance. The shot had vaporized part of her chest plate, leaving a few glowing bits of molten metal, but had failed to penetrate.
So that's how you wanna play it?
Boomer called out, clearly amused at her seeming invincibility.
Okay then, catch this, you fuck it!
Her head snapped to the side as Sickle came barreling out of the darkness. I had never before seen a pony simply take Sickle's charge. Though Boomer remained standing, the impact rocked her back. The balefire egg launcher discharged. I back-winged, lurching back as the projectile passed me, sailing well over its intended target. Below me, Boomer turned and threw her shoulder into Sickle, sending her staggering and followed up by rearing back and kicking out. It was immediately clear to me that Boomer, with her power armor, was at least as strong and durable as Sickle, if not considerably more so. But with how big and bulky she was, it was easy to forget how terrifyingly quick Sickle could be. She slipped to the side, catching only a glancing blow that her armor easily turned, and grappled the other mare. The difference in skill was telling, and a few seconds later Sickle had gotten a grip across Boomer's back. That was the end of it. Sickle twisted backwards, hauling the power armor off of its hooves and swinging it over herself to slam down onto the roof. The power armor lacked the flexibility to fight back effectively, and Sickle alternated between holding on and jamming her blades into the armor. The balefire egg finally landed, several hundred yards away. A brilliant flash of vivid green cast everything into highlights and shadows, even casting a glow across the clouds above. The sharp blast of the explosion was followed by a deep rumbling echo, and the distant fireball climbed into the sky, rapidly burning out. In moments, the light faded, plunging the world into darkness once more.
You missed.
Sickle happily growled, jamming a leg blade into the shoulder of Boomer's armor and tearing away a chunk of armor plate. Dusty's voice echoed across the courtyard.
Whisper, status!
We're good over here!
I replied, drifting a little closer as I did. In the aftermath of my shout, I heard another mechanical squeal, but not from the struggle behind me. My gaze dropped down to the courtyard. The turret of the ruined tank was slowly turning, its cannon swinging towards the building where Dusty and Starlight were. We had forgotten about the other raider. When it comes to keeping track of all the enemies around you, that seems very daunting, almost impossible to do. Especially when you don't have any sort of UI to help you out with where they are. Anyways, let's get on to our informative donators. Top donators are 630, J10 Man, Darkside, Only One Thing, Dash of Evergreen, and Ceru Orion. Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Alson Rolan, Stu Hex, Sword Brother and Mordred, Omicron Lyrae, Will, Chris, Twinkie, Hadzaza, Riot Soul, Iron Sky, Badass Waffle, and many more stunning people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.